Morning. So today I'm going to talk about turmoil and uncertainty. And just starting with this particular view, this is the air masses that are circulating currently above the planet. There could be a tropical cyclone forming somewhere in the world. There could be good weather happening. Unfortunately, we didn't have it this morning. Or there could be storms forming. So there's lots of uncertainty. We understand a lot about the weather. A lot of it we don't understand. So who is AXA XL and what is a global insurer? So AXA XL insure mainly commercial and industrial clients, and they're complex. We have clients that could be from a manufacturer of screws to a pharmaceutical company, and they're global. So these are companies that operate outside of a single national boundary. So they could operate again across 20, 30 countries, and when you start adding those things together with the complexity of the client, then that complexity really starts to expand. And AXA also has 20 businesses that form part of AXA XL, and we operate in over 200 countries. So we do that because our clients operate across the world, and we're talking about uncertainty and complexity. So my team are on the left. We are part of the risk consulting team. So we are helping underwriters who decide on the risks. We are helping the claims team, and we are helping clients understand the hazards and all of the specifics of location risk and broader elements that are geospatial in nature. And that's not a minor thing to talk about. The geospatial element is not always fully understood by businesses in the same way that people in this audience will consider location. And so it's very important for us. And the what and the where. The what and the where is kind of the bread and butter of what we look at. And from a geospatial point of view, everything we insure is a what, and it's somewhere. It may not be standing still, but it is somewhere, and we need to know where those things are. And most insurers insure millions of locations across the world, or just in a single country. We insure tens of millions of locations, and if we're looking at our reinsurance size, that would be billions of locations. So, that's a big element, and when you start looking at the interconnectivities and the complications of different parts of the world, it has a different element to it. There's such an old phrase, having all your eggs in one basket, and whilst we don't generally use that phrase in board meetings, it's something that's very, very relevant to insurers. If we were looking in the UK, the UK has specific dynamics. The dynamics of the UK is the floods, windstorms, subsidence, and the geopolitical situation is well understood. As soon as we move to other countries, they all have their other dynamics. Some of them are less stable, some of them have earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, some of them have tsunami risks. So immediately you're starting to see a lot more complication. So you might think that the spread of risk is useful because we haven't got everything in one place, and you'd be right. But once you start factoring those different dynamics into all those different countries, sometimes spreading the risk, unless you understand what those dynamics are and where those clusters could be, then you could be storing up problems based on events that could happen now or in the future. So the risk landscape, lots of perils that you'll probably be used to, what will be on your house insurance, maybe car insurance, etc., and some that are less familiar to you. But let's look at a real example. So let's say you are a company that makes bicycles. Fairly, maybe making bicycles isn't simple, but relatively simple. You operate in 5 countries. You make the same thing in all 5 factories. The factories are the same size. The factories are all made of the same materials. The building is made of the same materials. So that looks very similar, but it is very different depending on where they are. You could have, for instance, one factory in the UK, a factory in Japan. Now, Japan is subject to earthquakes, cyclones, floods, tsunamis. All of those things have a dynamic impact on the geography of those particular locations. And when you start looking at geopolitical changes as well, that gets an even further element to it. And let's look at the supply chain. The supply chain, your components that come into your bike factory are coming from all over the world, and most likely they're going to be coming from Asia. So again, if you're looking at things through a UK lens, your supply chain is very likely to be far more volatile than what you're used to sitting in the UK. So let's look at a port. Port, lots of things happening in the port. Now, we could insure the port. We could insure the ships coming into the port. We could insure the cargo that's on the ships and cargoes that's stored in the warehouse on the port. We could insure your bicycles that are stored in a warehouse on the port, which isn't cargo, you're just using warehouse capabilities. We could insure an extension to that port, a new terminal that's being put into the port. We could insure the energy facility, a wind turbine, an oil storage facility on the port. We could insure the rail line coming into the port. And also, there's the supply chain element. Some of you may have seen the situation that happened in Baltimore where a ship hit a bridge, the bridge came down. Now, a lot of the clients that would have been in Baltimore may not have been directly affected, but the flow of ships in and out of the port, it all stopped. It's continued to be blocked. It could be blocked for many months. So there are constantly different elements that could be at play here. But when we're talking about all of those different examples, each of those is a different business within AXA XL. And all of those, we operate, as I said, in 200 countries. So those clients could be from different countries. So for instance, some of those commodities could be clients that operate from all around the world. So if we think of all those data flows that are coming in from different businesses, from different countries, all coming into one particular location, then it's important that we understand what's going on there. And within GIS, we can understand it. We can start using, rather than just looking at a load of dots that happen just to be in a place that could be a port, we can start defining say, a shapefile that's defining the port, the building outlines, etc. We can start understanding the connectivity between each of those operations that happen in a port. So it's important that we understand the local aggregations to avoid nasty surprises. And here's a nasty surprise. This was the port of Tianjin, which in 2015, there was a very large explosion. As it says on here, it's one of the world's largest non-nuclear explosions. The blast zone covered 5 kilometers, and we didn't insure the port. We had some surprises on the port, and when I say surprises, the surprises were there were things that we didn't know we insured that were there, and there were also things that we didn't necessarily know the full element of the value of those assets. Because a port, things are coming and going from ports all the time. So it's very hard to actually understand the dynamic position of those ports at any particular one time. So we're going to get to a map. We've got to a map. So we're now looking at the macro level. This is actually an application that we're we're currently working on. And I mentioned before that we insure tens of millions of locations. Well, this is 27 million locations that have been clustered into hexagons to show the concentration of locations and value across the world. And all those businesses can start to understand. They may not want to see the big picture, but we can filter down into those individual businesses. They can understand where their hotspot profile is, but also from an insurer's perspective, we want to know where, if something happens, how much have we got in a particular place. But I mentioned a port, and a port's a big place. It's a very large area. But if we're thinking about hurricanes or tropical cyclones, a hurricane can be the size of the UK. The wind field can be the size of the UK. An earthquake can cover hundreds of kilometers in terms of its shake effects. Some of you may remember the Asian tsunami, which hit multiple countries that all bordered the Indian Ocean. So we've gone from something of concentrations in a port to something that's much, much bigger. And why is this important? Well, again, a real life example. In 1991, a hurricane hit Florida. It was Hurricane Andrew. It was one of the largest hurricanes ever to hit the US. The upshot of that, because a number of insurers got it wrong, is that 11 domestic insurers went out of business. So the downside from getting it wrong can be quite significant. But if we factor in climate change, the whole mix becomes very, very complicated. We think we understand some of these perils, but those perils are constantly changing. They're getting more they're getting more volatile, they're getting more frequent, and they're happening in places that we wouldn't necessarily think they would happen. So it's critical that we understand and manage our portfolios. So let's look at some live events. So this is an example in Australia. A lot happened in Australia this year. The first 3 months of this year, they had a very large flood in Queensland. They had multiple wildfires. They had a couple of cyclones that all occurred in the first 3 months of the year. This is a particular example of a wildfire. What we've done here is we've used some satellite imagery to show hotspots of activity. We monitor across the world, and hotspots can tell you lots of things, and they can tell you a lot of things that aren't necessarily wildfires. But we've looked at the clustering elements of those dots and said there's enough clusters in an area where there's foliage for it potentially to be a wildfire. Now, lots of wildfires happen in areas which may not be impacting us as a global insurer or our clients, but we still need to obviously be able to filter those things out. And using GIS, we're able to use our portfolio to actually infer, well, what have we got in that area where we think there's a wildfire? And on the right-hand side, this is where we've been able to extract the data from where we've got at that crossover between the heat spots and the hot spots. And we can start the conversations with our claims teams, because our claims teams are of a certain size. And if all of these things are going on over a 3-month period, they don't know where they're going, they don't know what's going on, because they're hearing on the news that there's this is happening, that's happening, and maybe there's a lot of things they're not hearing about. So they need to be able to make sure that they are engaged in the right area at the right time to give the support that our clients need to respond to some of these things. And if a wildfire is happening as well, those areas are off. It's not wise to be there. So there's no one reporting to say that my facility, my building has been burnt in a wildfire, because they should be the hell out of there. We're doing a fair bit of work now with remote sensing, so aerial, satellite, and drone imagery. And this is an aerial picture from a flyover a couple of days after the smoke had cleared. And this was actually the largest location in that particular area that was identified. And you can see the burned area that's basically surrounded the site, but didn't actually burn the buildings themselves. This, I believe, was a is a telecommunication site. So again, you can imagine what the downside that could have happened if that particular building had been affected. Now, there could have been a claim here because the fact that it was an unmanned site and that there could still be disruptions from the wildfire that happened around it. So it's critical for us that we respond quickly to events, and GIS is giving us the ability to respond quicker and bringing all of these elements together so that we can respond and be there for our clients when they really need us, which is when the claims happen. So the world keeps turning. I mentioned climate change. All of these elements are adding additional complexity to what we have looked at, what we've historically looked at. And so for us, understanding the interconnectivities between our risk locations is really important, and it's key to us. And GIS is really helping us to really get a good understanding of where those location specifics come into play and helping us drive our business forward. Thank you.